3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Welcome to the Mix Zone by Infront X Lab. On this podcast, we chat with sports and innovation leaders from around the globe, talking about everything from the newest technologies to major trends affecting our industry. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're Infront X Lab, the innovation branch of digital media company Infront X. We help sports and entertainment organizations gain the upper hand with innovation and bring them closer to cutting-edge technologies, covering all sports-related industries from data to content and everything in between.
Here we go!
I'm Marav Savir, marketing manager at the lab and host of this podcast. In this day and age, we're all fighting for eyeballs, and not just within the sports industry. We're battling the entertainment industry as well, trying to draw viewers away from Netflix, Disney Plus, and the likes, in an attempt to engage with our fans on our own platforms and draw them to watch our content. This means constantly producing new, exciting content and placing it in front of our fans, which isn't easy to begin with. Often this means constantly creating new video content, posting it to various social networks and OTT platforms, and keeping up with the analytics afterwards. When it comes to sharing content on social and OTT, each has its own benefits and drawbacks. For example, social networks are free and allow you to gain more exposure, but you lose some of your control as a creator. Meanwhile, OTT platforms draw fans to owned and operated properties, but are expensive to build. That's where our guest today fits in. Jan Umansky is the CEO and co-founder of Videoflow. Videoflow provides media companies with the tools to create their own video platforms and to offer fans live and on-demand interactive video experiences without having to code. This allows sports and media organizations to maintain end-to-end control of their own video channels without making use of video sharing sites such as YouTube and Vimeo. This means they maintain ownership of their content and do so at a lower cost. Jan, welcome to the Mix Zone.
Hi, happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you as well. And before we start talking about Videoflow, let's get to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, originally from Israel. I've been in the broadcast industry for most of my career, actually all of my career, because I started straight out of college. And I've been working mainly on live productions around the world throughout the different positions I've been through. And that includes events like the Olympics, the Super Bowl, elections around the world. So that's my career path before starting Videoflow. And then today I stay in New York and run Videoflow.
So before we get into Videoflow and the technology and how it actually works, how did the idea for Videoflow come about, and what did those early days of the company look like?
Well, I think the idea for Videoflow happened very organically, like I mentioned, because my personal experience in the live broadcasting space, I think it was just about time where we all started seeing broadcasters and media groups in general starting to kind of switch to different models of delivering content, right? So that was the beginning of OTT. And before the dust settled, OTT was just a buzzword. Everybody were like excited by the word OTT. Everything was OTT, OTT, OTT. But in reality, I think not many of the content groups understood what it actually means, because in their mind, it was just, we switch the cable to stop being SDI and become being an Ethernet cable. We move to the internet. And basically that's it. But the reality was very, very different, because it's not like just the technology is changing. It's also your audience are changing. It's the change of the way your viewers consume your content. It's the change of the devices that content is delivered on. So seeing this struggle happen for many broadcasters and media companies kind of led to the idea of, hey, why don't we do this in a simple way. Why don't we abstract all these complexities and just let them do their thing, which is deliver amazing content to their viewers?
And what year are we talking about right now? When did this all start?
Well, the idea itself started in, I believe, 2016. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was 2016, but we officially launched and went on air in early 2018.
So now, what does the company look like now, 3 years after the launch, going on 4 years after the launch, end of 2021, beginning of 2022?
We are a pretty lean team. We are a total of 8 people. We are very distributed. So our product person is in Silicon Valley. We have developers in Israel, Ukraine, and Rome. We have sales that is in Connecticut, US. The pandemic kind of pushed us to be more distributed. But we are very highly efficient because, based on our clients and the ability to scale, we're running a pretty tight operation considering the fact that we are globally distributed.
Yeah, and how do you handle being globally distributed, not only in terms of getting the work done, but also as a company culture when you're such a tight-knit small group?
Well, it's important to be in touch with everyone. I don't think hierarchy is the right model in those kind of scenarios. It's all flat, organized. Everybody, everyone helps everyone wherever they can, and communication is key. So we are talking with everyone almost on a daily basis. And if it's not me, it's my co-founder. Communication, I guess, is the main thing. The other thing I would say that is important is clarity and transparency, making sure that everybody knows what you're building, where are you going, because especially for developers, it's easy to get lost in the technicalities of things, and always need to show like the big picture. The vision is, I think, what's important to share.
So now let's talk a little bit more about the technology behind VideoFlow and what VideoFlow does. Your aim is to help media companies take full ownership of their video content by helping them build these OTT platforms. How does VideoFlow do that?
Well, there is a few steps in the way to build an OTT platform on VideoFlow, but I guess the main thing is the abstraction of everything that doesn't require a contextual or artistic decision. And that's basically the idea. The platform itself is no-code platform, meaning that the user doesn't have to type in any kind of code to make this entire thing work. So the way this works is we have 3 main steps. You bring your content into VideoFlow. It's by either uploading videos, just importing them from your existing storage, connecting to existing CDNs. Then you choose which videos or which content goes into your channel. And by the way, you can build many channels, right? It doesn't mean that every user has to have only one video channel, one OTT channel. And then you just style it. You basically define the look and feel to match your brand, right? So this is one of our core things. We want to give you the whole control, so you don't have to put it on a platform that essentially strips away your brand.
In terms of, a fan and a viewer who's watching, they don't see the difference between someone who has created their OTT platform via VideoFlow rather than some expensive OTT platform that was built over a long period of time.
That's true. Furthermore, maybe they will have a better experience through VideoFlow, given the recent past of the big OTT platforms. I will not mention names.
We'll leave those out of this conversation. And now, Jan, you've also coined this term of micro bundling. What is this concept?
Right. Well, the concept itself means that different pieces of content that you own as a media brand could work better for you if you would be able to serve them through different channels. So the best example would be if I have an interview with a football player, right? Traditionally, if I would like to build an OTT channel and I would have to spend a lot of money in developing it, for example, right? I would focus on one offering that would be the best offering I can possibly give that targets the biggest amount of audiences that I could possibly get, right? Because I just have one platform. I don't have money to prototype, test, or deploy multiple platforms, right? Multiple OTT channels. What we're saying is if you stripped away the high cost and you strip away the time to market that it takes to launch an OTT platform, and you basically launch multiple platforms that bundle content in different ways. So for example, you have an OTT channel that is dedicated to a specific player that contains all their games and interviews. And then you have another OTT channel that is dedicated to a specific team that contains all the players. You could build those offerings and basically give them and offer them, to the end user. And that will essentially create a higher conversion because people can get exactly what they want instead of paying for one platform and get a fraction of the content this platform has to offer. So everybody wins, really.
This goes hand in hand with this trend of personalizing content per fan and not per fan group.
Exactly. That's right.
A couple follow-up questions on what you just said. So first of all, you're talking about these different channels that can each target a different fan based on what he or she wants to view and who they want to view. Now, how many channels can one media company or one sports organization have via Videoflow, and how are they portrayed to the viewer? You mentioned, targeting them with just one specific channel.
So in terms of amount of channel, really the number in theory is infinite, right? So it's all cloud-based and it can scale very, very quickly. That's one of the things that we do. To the other question of how do they get to the viewers? Well, this is something that is really depending on the brand itself, right? We are not going against social media, for example, for those kind of purposes. Social media is a great mechanism to promote your content, right? Its promotional capabilities are, of course, give them a huge advantage. The marketing and branding capabilities, or should I say the retainer of the branding, this is where there are some flaws in that model, in the social media model. So I think combination of both is the winning formula here.
You also talked about time to market, and you advertise that it takes only a few minutes to create an OTT channel. Is it really just a few minutes? You mentioned just customizing it to your brand, but how long can it take for someone to build this OTT platform and launch it to a fan, say after an interview was conducted and they want to publish this video? Can they get it to the fans really in a matter of minutes?
Well, they could really. I think the slowest part of this entire process is always getting the content in. If you have the content, and we normally assume that the media brand that own content will have it, then getting it to the fan is really just a matter of selecting which videos go into the channel and then applying the brand, which is colors, logos, and so on. Of course, you can spend hours in fine-tuning it, but if you would come to me now and say, hey, I have a bunch of videos and I need to launch something so my viewers can see it, yeah, it would take a few minutes to be live.
And now, in terms of how you help your customers, what do you see as the biggest challenge that you help your customers overcome?
I think the direct to consumer challenge that many of content owners are struggling with today, that would be the main one. Basically, groups that have a lot of content and basically they don't know how to leverage it better, how to make this content work for them, right? Something that could be monetized is not because they don't have the capability to build a paywall, for example. So many people opt out for something very quick, right? Let's put it on YouTube and allow advertising. But that's not really making money unless you're an individual creator that don't need to split the revenue and pay salaries. and you get millions on top of millions of views every month, right? So,
So
there has to be a better way.
So if we're talking about monetization, what are these better ways? What are some of the creative opportunities that you've seen your clients pursue using VideoFlow?
Well, from a monetization standpoint, really what we are doing is we're allowing the client to choose what monetization model they want to use. And today, what we support is the three standard monetization models, which is SVOD, TVOD, and AVOD: subscription, transactional, and ad driven. But the way this works, is that they would choose, and of course they can mix and match. They could say, hey, here is a content with the tag, highlights, and it's going to be free or ad driven, while some other content that contains a tag live is going to be pay-per-view and it's going to cost X amount of money. Now, to your other question about what are the creative ways in which customers use this, that would be probably the targeting of the audience, right? So content that earlier were not even monetizable. I will give you an example. NTT in Japan creating channels for youth sports, where it's mainly targeting families and friends, right? Mm-hmm. And they basically creating monetization, whether it's ad driven, subscription driven, for families to essentially watch content of their kids playing, which is very, very relevant, especially because of all the lockdowns and all the situation that is happening where you cannot maybe attend the game in person.
So now you mentioned NTT, and we're talking about providing families access to watch their loved ones. So when we're talking about clients, providing it for families and youth sports are much smaller organizations. So who is your target client base? Is it these big organizations who we're used to seeing all over the world? Is it the smaller ones? Is it everyone in between?
Our target client is anyone between an SMB and an enterprise brand. Essentially, what I usually say when I do demos, sales demos, is if you own content that you believe has value, you should be monetizing it. And we see it all the time. There is a ton of articles coming up every day about the creator economy and how people basically reclaim ownership of their content because suddenly they realize that their content is the economic driver of so many platforms, and they basically see a fraction of the cost. So if you are a company that have content, and it can be a boutique yoga studio, or you're a big broadcaster, you could leverage VideoFlow, and you can leverage it maybe for different uses. VideoFlow could be used for prototyping instead of waiting to see your OTT channel in 1 year after paying millions of dollars for development and finding out that it's not what you expected. Or if you are just owning, a few pieces of content that you want to monetize, everyone in between can use VideoFlow.
So if we're talking about revenue, how much have you seen some of your clients really be able to achieve in terms of revenue using VideoFlow?
Well, it really varies. Again, so one of the things that we're doing is the whole pricing model is very, very transparent. And we allow our clients to set up their price completely. So for example, like if there is some production that happens for family and friends, nobody there is really trying to make money from those families. They just want to watch their loved ones, right? So they can set up the price. They choose to set up the price, by themselves. So we've seen, channels that go from a few hundreds of dollars in revenue to a few tens of thousands, really depending on the content.
Now, in terms of using VideoFlow, what is your business model? Because obviously we are talking about different organizations in different sizes with different budgets. So how do you work with these different organizations in terms of your business model?
That's a very good question. Well, let's start with the smaller groups. So the smaller groups are easier to deal with because this is what we call as self-onboarding, right? This is an inbound traffic. Let's say somebody is interested in using VideoFlow. They can sign up, they can put in the credit card, and basically now they're running. The model itself is you pay for the channel, and then you pay for the, so that's paying for the channel is a fixed price. And then on top of that, you pay for bandwidth, how much content was viewed. And then the unique part of this is if you introduce a paywall, then you will obviously pay less for bandwidth because now you have a natural filter there, right? You have only those people who decide to pay you are going to watch the content, which means we get less money for bandwidth. So we switch to a revenue share model. Again, very fair. So then if the client is selling, we are sharing the revenue instead of just taking their money and they're not making any profit. So that's for smaller groups. For bigger enterprises, it's always a project. So we have the standard stuff, a quote. We go after big events like, I don't know, Olympics or something, and then it's always a dedicated project, and we need to scope out and then handle.
Now, in terms of fan experiences, you also offer real-time interactions between fans via social media on your platforms. How does that work and come into play? And when you're setting it up with what the fan sees, how does that all experience work?
Right. So again, this is also like a part of the platform itself where you don't need to code, obviously. It's more about setting the experience. So basically you start with a template. So you already have something to work with. And then what you do is you would choose essentially what features you want to have within your interactive experience. That could be, for example, chat or a social media feed, or some interactive data feed that needs to come, interactive timelines, for example, and so on. Now, the difference with interactivity that we introduce also is by introducing an open framework that's called VideoFlow framework. And this framework allows, actually, this is where code comes in. So it is outside the platform, allowing the developers essentially build their own interactions and deploy them on VideoFlow. So the way we see this in the future is, imagine a marketplace of interactions, people that build all kinds of interactions, whether it's gaming, betting, or anything in between. And other clients can basically take those interactions and bring them into their experiences.
Now, how have changing fan preferences, because fans are changing daily based on what they want to see, how they want to see it, how they want to interact with content. How has that affected your offerings and the ways in which you continue to develop VideoFlow?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that since we saw this even before the pandemic, of course, but since the pandemic started, I believe that, it accelerated things, especially it accelerated the direct to consumer experience. And the reason for that is many brands that didn't have any kind of broadcast capabilities suddenly found themselves without a way to reach their audiences, right? So obviously the only way to go is direct to consumer, because if you're a broadcaster that was in the market for 50 years, right? It's very hard to turn off your channels and say, well, from now on, I'm going to be OTT direct to consumer and everything else is done. It will not happen. It's a transition that will take decades. But if you never had any infrastructure before, right? And suddenly you cannot reach your audiences, then you obviously will be looking for additional experiences that you can provide. And of course, the preference of the audiences changed as well, because audiences demand more content because they had more time, lockdowns. And it doesn't mean they had more money. So
it doesn't mean they had more games also, with so many leagues that, took a break because of COVID at the beginning.
Right. So there was no content to begin with. There was no additional money for people, but there was a lot of time on their hands. So really, an interesting thing we saw through, I cannot mention the client, but historic content replays became something very, very interesting. And suddenly they said, hey, we are not monetizing historic games that people might miss. And actually it worked because they got great feedback by creating streaming historic events through a dedicated platform.
The little bit of a sense of nostalgia always gets people going.
Yeah, exactly.
If we take a look at the industry as a whole and putting nostalgia aside, take a look to the future, what trends have you recognized in sports content production that will affect how we both deliver and consume sports in the future?
Well, there is a few. First of all, is I think the way we treat content has changed, right? So what we call content today was not something that was called content in the past. So the best example is, for example, if you have famous athletes that, for example, post on social media, it used to be one post on Facebook a few years ago. Then it became a few photos on Instagram, right? Now, everyone producing video and they're becoming really good at it. And of course, content owners are looking at this as, hey, this is now a valid piece of content that viewers can watch. So obviously, this is another monetization opportunity. So I think one of the trends that is happening is the sources. The amount of sources content is coming from is growing exponentially, really. Content now can come from individual players, content come from teams that produce their own content through somebody who is straight out of college, started shooting additional content. Content is produced through automated cameras and AI with companies like Pixelot, for example, right? And then content is also produced by the content owners. So this amount of content that we have definitely requires some way to monetize and deliver this content to the viewers.
And so what's next for Videoflow? If we take these trends into consideration, we take fan preferences into consideration, what's next for the company?
Next for the company is, well, what we're really doing these days is growth, right? We already been in the market for a few years. We've proven the product market fit, and we had some amazing projects that we were very fortunate to be a part of. Now it's time to essentially grow, going after all these medium and big groups to essentially help them to get their content to their viewers. And I think part of this is not just growth in terms of investment and throw money at it. Part of it, a big part of it, is also education and showing that there are other ways, better ways to monetize your content.
Well, it's definitely fascinating, Jan. And before we let you go, we are going to hit you with our rapid fire questions, just a couple of questions, and as quick as you can. You ready for them?
Hang on, give me a second. Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Well, first of all, how do you define innovation?
Oh, wow. Okay. Differentiation and positioning, I would say. Positioning in the market.
And if you could go back and do one thing differently, do it better, what would it be?
Deploy faster, I think. Go to the audience faster and don't worry about mistakes that might come up.
And what piece of advice would you give your younger self at the start of your journey?
Oh, wow. Buy Bitcoin.
That simple. Buy Bitcoin as soon as it comes out.
Exactly. I would say probably, again, I would say just move faster and less careful at the beginning, I think, is the right way to go, instead of focusing on, being perfect and releasing everything only when it's 100% ready.
Who was or still is your tech role model?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that probably is one of our mentors. His name is Andrei Yursky. I don't know if you ever heard this name.
I admit I have not.
He is a Russian Israeli who now lives in the US. And we met him through the accelerator program that we've been selected for in Silicon Valley. He is, by a lack of better description, the inventor of the podcast. And
we owe him a lot.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's just a great person, and I really admire the balance that he has between professional work and the way he lives his life. And this is something to really strive for. And yeah, I think he is a great example, great living example.
Well, it's definitely a name I'm going to Google as soon as we finish our recording. But Jan, last but not least, what technology has had the biggest impact on you?
I would say from the recent probably years, that would be blockchain.
Why is that?
I'm a big believer in the blockchain technology and decentralization. I think it can affect many aspects in our daily lives. I also see the blockchain being part of what we are building in the future as well. Again, we are focused around decentralization in our own way, where we want to give the content owners, again, their content rights back, right? And decentralization really is feeling very natural and just a part of this entire ecosystem. And it's something that's going to happen. And we can talk about the blockchain and how it relates to video and distribution for a very long time. So I'm not going to do it now.
That could be a very long podcast.
Exactly right. But
we'll save it for another day.
Yeah, I think that it's just something that is, it's here. It's not going to go away, and it's going to change our life fundamentally.
Well, Jan, I had a great time chatting with you today, and thank you so much for joining us on the Mix Zone.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much.
And if our listeners want to reach out to you anywhere, can they do that?
Yeah, they can reach me at jan@videoflow.io.
Fantastic. Well, Jan, thank you so much for being with us. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Merav. It was great.
Here we go.
That wraps up this episode of The Mix Zone by Infront X Lab. You can follow us on LinkedIn and be in touch with our team for more information about sports tech solutions. Just shoot us an email at lab@infrontx.com. We'll see you next time.